Hi guys, this is Alex from Mason Lifestyle coming at you again. Today we're going to start a couple of series as to how to sew to certain fabrics that perhaps you haven't used before. And today I thought that we would do wool. I've seen a lot of questions on Instagram about people that look like they are about to start working with wool and they have no idea where to start. So let's just start with, before you cut any pattern pieces, before you do anything, you do have to pre-treat your fabric, any wool fabric. So how do you pre-treat it? It's pretty much you have to pre-shrink it. And the way that you can go about it three different options. You can, and usually option one is you can grab another garment, probably maybe like an old t-shirt, and get it sopping wet, not dripping wet, but pretty wet. And then you throw it in your dryer for about 30 minutes on the highest setting along with your wool fabric. And that will cause a lot of steam in there, and that will pre-shrink your fabric. Again, 30 minutes. Your wool fabric, big piece, 2-3 meters, whatever is it that you need to pre-treat. Another way is to grab your iron, put it in the highest setting, and usually there is a wool setting in your iron. My iron has a little wool setting over there and tons of steam. So that is it. And you get your iron steaming away, and you're going to hover about 1/2 inch to 1 inch over your fabric. Again, you want it to hover with lots of steam. You don't want to press it right on top of your cloth. You want it to hover, and your fabric will, it will shrink. It's not going to shrink a ton, but it'll shrink ever so slightly, and that's what you want. This option takes a long time, especially if you have, let's say you have 2-3 meters, yards of fabric to work with. That's going to take a long time, so that's why I usually like option number one. And then option number 3 is you take your fabric to a dry cleaner and they will pre-shrink it for you. So again, I like option 1 because it's just the quickest, cheapest, and easiest way to pre-treat your fabric. Something else that you want to keep in mind are your sewing needles. For wools, you can use universal needles, and of course you are going to have to keep in mind what type of wool if you're using. If you're using a lighter wool, you can get away with 80-12 universal needles. That's for lighter wools. If you are doing like a medium type of wool, then you're looking at like 90-14, again, universal needles, right? And if you're working with like a thicker wool, you're gonna need between 100 to 16 needles. Again, universal needles. You can stick with universal needles. You're just going to need a thicker needle if your wool is thicker. So that's something to keep in mind. As far as stitch length, you can do a 2.4, probably 2.5 to 3 millimeter stitch length. You're just going to have to remember to lower the presser foot on your machine. And, I always say just try this out before you start stitching. Just grab a piece of fabric and just do a little stitching length on it and test it out and see which one you like the best. So as far as stitch length, I have a 2.4, or you can use up to 3 millimeter stitch length. It can be a straight stitch, so you don't have to go ahead and do a zigzag stitch because this is not a stretch fabric. So again, you can stitch and back stitch to lock in your stitches. So again, here you go. So 2.4 millimeters in stitch length. I also like to stick with a regular presser foot. You can use a walking foot if it starts getting a little bit heavier, but a regular presser foot does the job, so you can stick with that. All right, so pressing your seams. So stitch your seam, grab your iron on the highest setting, lots of seam. You really want a lot of seam for this. Get a press cloth, put it over, and then press your seams. And usually you should be using a tailor's clapper, but guess what, guys? I don't have a tailor's clapper. I have this awesome piece of wood, a piece of 2x4. It does the job. So again, go ahead and press. And once you're done with that section, you grab your tailor's clapper or my fancy chunk of wood, and you press in. You count about like 5 to 8 seconds, and then you let it go, and that will press your seams open. So that is how you press wool. So again, don't skip this part. You really want to make sure that you press those seams, because here is the finished side. So it makes a huge difference. Next thing to keep in mind, you want to make sure that you grade your seams, right? So maybe if this was 5/8 on this side, I have 3/8 on that side, but you want to grade your seams. And the reason why is that perhaps you are finishing your facings, right? And then you have to press this. So you don't want that line of that bulk. And really what you want to do is you want to reduce the bulk. So make sure that you always grade your seams. And it's as easy as just grabbing a pair of shears and just cutting away. And if you have a set of duckbill shears, I don't have one, but if you do, this is a great time to use those. So don't forget to grade your seams. So again, guys, I graded my seam. So when I press this on the right side, I don't have like bulk on my stitching. So always make sure that you grade those seams. Super important. Don't skip the step. All right, guys, almost done. Don't forget to store your wool finished garments after you are done, or if you have any wool in your fabric stash, make sure you store it properly. Moths love wool, and somehow they will find it and they will eat it. So make sure that you store it properly, perhaps with a couple of sprigs of lavender, dried lavender, or perhaps cedar balls. You really want to make sure that you store it properly, because if you come back, you may be seeing a couple of holes in your garment, and that's because the moths went to town. So make sure that you store it properly. All right, guys, I hope you liked this video. Please give it a thumbs up. And of course, I'm going to be linking all of these little tidbits on my website, and I will see you next time. Bye.